Hello there lovely people, it's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today we are going to take a closer look at Splatoon, and you can probably tell I'm excited about it. The game has an enigmatic May release date, and I'd like to point out that that's May the month, not that it may come out. It's definitely coming out. Yes, last week I was lucky enough to get a preview session with the game, and let me tell you, it is everything I had hoped it would be. It is brilliant. But one word isn't going to satisfy you hungry inklings, so let's go a little bit more in depth and let's start off with the single player. The single player campaign mixes shooting and platforming in a way that I must admit I've never really seen before. I mean, yeah, it's got that sort of fluid based gameplay that you got in Mario Sunshine, but there's so much more of a focus on the shooting. It's much more precise, not to say that there isn't plenty of platforming focus as well. The similarities to Mario don't end there. The levels themselves are set up similarly to the galaxies in Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario Galaxy 2, where you have the individual planets, only these are more just sort of like floating platforms, and you've got to get from point A to point B in order to jump to another platform like the planets in Mario Galaxy. You'll have various elements there to help you, things like sponges that grow when you shoot them full of ink, which you can then swim through, but you've also got lots of obstacles, and the main obstacle is the enemy force, known as the Octarians. These octopuses are out to stop you no matter what, and they've got a surprising amount of firepower behind them, considering they are basically just tentacles. There are loads of these different types of Octarians to keep you on your toes, and you really will have to be on your toes, particularly when you go against the most formidable of these, the Octolings. When you fight them, you'll be in an arena similar to the multiplayer, but it is not about killing them, and it is not about covering the ground like it is in Turf War, which I'll explain more in a minute. It's all about getting from point A to point B, like the main campaign, which is important because these are considered boss levels, and they are more difficult, but they do sort of stick to that same core gameplay, which I think is good. However, the levels that we played were quite simple and not too difficult. There were some difficult parts, but there really wasn't an awful lot of challenge. We can only hope that the later levels do include more of a challenge, and I'd be surprised if they didn't. Another interesting point, throughout the single player levels that we played, we only had access to one gun, the standard Splattershot, which is like an assault rifle. It's the same basic weapon that you would have seen in a lot of videos and things like that, but there are other weapons, they just so happen to be in the multiplayer, so let's get stuck into that, shall we? Because that's what I'm excited about. The multiplayer had two game modes when we went to preview it. One which was just the Turf War, which everybody already knows, but I'll explain anyway, where you basically have to cover as much of the ground as possible in your colour ink. There is an enemy team trying to do the same thing, and you can shoot and kill them. However, you can kill all of the opponents as many times as you like, but if they've got more ground covered, they still win. The other game mode is brand new, and it's called Splat Zones, and it's a bit like King of the Hill from a lot of other games, you know, mainly shooters and things like that, but there is a difference. There's a specified area that you have to cover with ink, and you share it with an opponent, so you're constantly battling to try and cover it as much as possible. And if you do manage to cover it all, your timer will start to decrease, and if it hits 0, you win. It's really interesting because you don't have to stay in the area in order to capture it, so it opens up a lot of strategic elements that haven't been found in other games, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. Splat Zones takes place in something called Ranked Battle Mode, which is basically like any ranked system in any other shooter game, or indeed Mario Kart 8, where you go online and if you win, you gain points, if you lose points. It's as simple as that, and it works really well, and it will include other game modes, but that was the only one available at the time. Now onto the weapons that I said I was going to talk about earlier and didn't get onto immediately. There are 4 main types of weapons, but that's not all that you can choose from. The 4 main types are the Splattershot, which is basically like an assault rifle. There's the Splat Charger, which is a bit like a sniper rifle, and you sort of have to hold the button down and release it, and it has a much greater distance than most weapons. There's the Blaster, which is kind of like a grenade launcher and explodes in a big sort of cloud of ink. And there's also the Splat Roller, which is just literally like a paint roller. They're all really unique and have their own quirks. I mean, the Splat Roller can cover huge amounts of ground very easily, but at the same time it is almost useless. In fact, it pretty much is useless at any sort of range. By contrast, the Splat Charger is absolutely excellent at taking out enemy inklings, but is rubbish at covering ground. It's a payoff every time. However, there are other variations of these weapons that you can choose from, and there are loads. I mean, I must have seen about 6 variations of the Splattershot, and that's not even beginning to go into the Splat Charger and the Blaster and the Roller. Basically, there's loads to choose from. These variations all have slightly different stats, usually little changes, but they make a big difference. For example, the weapon I got along with best with was a variation on the Splattershot, and it had a very different physical design, but moreover the range was about 1.5 times out of the standard Splattershot. This meant that I had a huge advantage over other Splattershot users because they couldn't get in close enough in order to get me, which was fantastic. However, it was considerably weaker and was nowhere near as good at covering ground, so there's always a payoff. Also, you've got the secondary weapons, which are things like various grenades, and there's a sort of a wall that has a load of ink that stops enemies from shooting through, which is pretty unique. But more importantly, there are these special abilities. Now, these are the things I absolutely love. You charge these up by covering ground with your ink, and once you activate them, they can do all manner of things, and they range wildly from the sort of very sensible and basic, like just a shield that prevents you from harm, all the way to the much more interesting things which I'm about to tell you about. One of the abilities is unlimited grenades. You can just throw as many grenades as you like for a short amount of time, and you can cover loads of ground with this. But more importantly, and my favourite, is the Ink Strike. You activate this bad boy by tapping on the map, and immediately a rocket will shoot up, and this sort of whirlwind of ink will then strike down at this area that you've specified and cause anyone who's in it to die immediately, as you might imagine, but also cover really quite a medium-sized area entirely with your ink. It's absolutely brilliant, and the fact that you can use it remotely is utterly fantastic. I really loved it, can you tell? So there are bags of customization and loads of different things you can do. Splatoon really is looking to be one of the best multiplayer experiences on the Wii U, and frankly, if you're a multiplayer fan, you'd be mad not to keep an eye on this, so do so. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, why don't you splat that subscribe button with some ink, and be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo related content. Thank you again for watching, bye bye.